Good afternoon. Welcome to our daily press briefing online and live on EBS. Today is Monday, 14 December. Before moving on to your questions, we have a few announcements for you today. Comme nous n'avons pas eu de rendez-vous de midi vendredi en raison du Conseil européen, permettez-moi de commencer avec l'agenda de la présidente pour cette semaine. Ce matin, la présidente a participé ou est encore en train de participer par visioconférence à un événement pour commémorer le 60e anniversaire de la Convention de l'Organisation de coopération et de développement économique, l'OCDE. Demain, comme d'habitude, elle présidera la réunion du collège. Plus tard dans l'après-midi, elle recevra le directeur général de l'Organisation mondiale de la santé, le docteur Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus. Puis mercredi matin, la présidente participera au débat en plénière du Parlement européen sur les conclusions du Conseil européen de la semaine dernière. Dans l'après-midi, la présidente prononcera un discours à la conférence européenne sur les perspectives agricoles 2020 par vidéoconférence. Now, as a meeting of the heads of cabinet of the commissioners has not yet finished, I'm not able yet to confirm to you the agenda and press arrangements related to tomorrow's college meeting. We will inform you about them this afternoon as soon as Hebdo is finished. And with this, I'd like to pass the floor to Sonia to tell us about a new app which we should all be downloading. Sonia.
Good afternoon, and many thanks, Eric. Indeed, we have some important news today related to Reopen EU. As you know, the platform Reopen EU was launched already mid-June, but now we are also launching a mobile application, which is both available for Android and iOS phones, free of charge. Reopen EU is a one-stop shop providing comprehensive, up-to-date information on the health situation, safety and travel measures in all EU member states, and also in Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland. Users can be informed in real time on national quarantine measures, testing requirements, and mobile coronavirus contact tracing and warning apps. The information on Reopen EU application is available in the 24 official EU languages using verified data provided by the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control, also by our member states. The platform Reopen EU, as I mentioned, was launched in mid-June to help citizens travel safely. For more information, please consult our daily news. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Finalement, permettez-moi de vous rappeler les vidéoconférences du jour. D'abord, le vice-président Margaritis Schinas et la commissaire Ylva Johansson participent aujourd'hui à la vidéoconférence des ministres des Affaires intérieures. Une conférence de presse avec la commissaire Johansson aura lieu vers 17h15. Puis, la commissaire Kadri Simpson participe à la vidéoconférence des ministres de l'énergie qui aborde notamment le sujet de l'intégration du système énergétique européen. Une conférence de presse avec la commissaire aura lieu vers 13h30. Finalement, le haut représentant vice-président Josep Borrell est aujourd'hui à Berlin pour présider la réunion ministérielle informelle UE Amérique latine et Caraïbes. Le vice-président exécutif Valdis Dombrovskis et la commissaire Jutta Urpilainen y participeront également. La réunion vise à relancer l'engagement politique de haut niveau avec l'Amérique latine et les Caraïbes. Une conférence de presse avec le haut représentant Borrell aura lieu à 13h. Voilà qui conclut nos annonces et nous pouvons donc passer à vos questions. Je passe la parole tout de suite à Lily. Lily, you have the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Does the Commission still think that there is sufficient time for the European Parliament to ratify a Brexit deal? And of course, I'm asking because it is the Commission's role to propose provisional application. So it is up to you to make the call. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. I pass the floor to Dan.
Hi, Lily, and thanks very much for your question. I think first things first, you will have seen the joint statement that we published yesterday following the President's phone call with Prime Minister Johnson. You will see that we've agreed to go the extra mile to continue talks on the future partnership with the UK. Even though we are at a late stage, we think that it is our responsibility, it is the responsible thing to do to continue negotiations. We're of course aware that time is short. The more time that goes by, the less likely it is that we will have a deal in place on the 1st of January. That's just a statement of fact. As for what might happen in the coming days, you'll also understand that I cannot tell the future, or I cannot say what may or may not happen over these days. What I can say, though, is that we are fully dedicated to trying to reach a deal with the UK.
Lily, follow up.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick follow-up. But do you think that there is sufficient time, as it stands now, for the European Parliament to ratify a deal?
Lily, I would say where there's a will, there's a way, but the negotiations are ongoing, and obviously it will depend on the point in time at which they end, assuming that they end with a deal. Okay, let's stick to the issue of the EU-UK negotiations. In case there are other questions, please only keep your hand raised if you have a question on this. I see two hands raised, or one hand raised, sorry. Louise? No? Is it on EU-UK negotiations?
Sort of. It's on the fisheries. Can you hear me?
Well, yes, first of all, we can hear you. And secondly, if it's on fisheries in the context of EU-UK, then go ahead.
Yes, I don't know if this has been asked before, so I'm sorry, I wasn't there last week, but it's about the contingency measures that you published last week about the fisheries, where it says there's a proposal for regulation to create a framework that could be used after New Year's if there is no Brexit agreement. So there can be a reciprocal access by the EU and UK in the waters. How far are we on that one? Is that being negotiated now on the side of the Brexit negotiations? Because now there is the fisheries ministers are going to meet tomorrow. So can you say how far are those negotiations? And a little bit maybe about the fisheries discussions tomorrow in the council. Are they going to only talk about what we can fish in our own waters, or will we also take that proposal for regulation into account? Or I don't know if you can elaborate a little bit on that.
Dan.
Hi, Louise. I think there's a number of different angles to your question, so let me deal with them one by one. First of all, our contingency measures that we adopted last week. So just to be sure, we don't negotiate our contingency plans. These are proposals that we put forward from the Commission to ensure that there is some form of legal framework in place on the 1st of January in case we are in a no-deal scenario. And that's the bottom line. So where are we with that? We proposed those measures on Thursday, and they're now with the Council and the Parliament for adoption. I don't have an exact date yet as to when they will be adopted. Secondly, on the actual negotiations with the UK, fisheries is one of the subjects that's being discussed. It's one of the subjects in which we have differing opinions and differing positions, and of course we're trying to work through all of those to get a deal, because ultimately we will need to have some form of sustainable agreement with the UK in the area of fisheries that protects the lives and livelihoods of our fishing communities. Now, as for the conversations and discussions that are happening across the street in the Council this week on fisheries, more generally in the area of future EU discussions, I think I would pass the floor to Tim, if I'm right.
Yeah, but I think the question from Louise was whether the Council would discuss the EU-UK negotiations on fish, not the general agenda of fish, but we can come back to that later Louise, if you're interested. On the contingency measures, I think it's also very important to say that contingency measures require reciprocity, right? So they would only enter into force if the UK side adopts the same measures, granting the EU side the benefits that we would be granting the UK side through our contingency measures. That's very, very important to note, I believe. Okay, Louise, you have a follow-up.
You have to negotiate that with the Brits, or I mean, can just not expect them to, or do you just expect them, and that if we adapt it, they will adapt it as well, or? Because I guess that's the whole issue of the fisheries negotiations, isn't it?
I think Dan has made it clear there's no negotiation. We've adopted some. They will enter into force if the UK side, apologies, adopts the same.
Okay, thank you.
Raf. Raf, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, but we missed the beginning of your question.
That must have been just saying good morning, I hope. And good morning. I have a question about Michel Barnier, what he said when he came to brief the ambassadors of the member states. When he came in, he said that in French, ça veut dire deux conditions qui ne sont pas encore remplies. He was only speaking of level playing field and of the fisheries issue. I wonder what happened to the governance issue, to the legal oversight. Has there been sufficient progress there that we no longer see need to count that among the big three? Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, Raf. I think the point that Michel Barnier was making was that these are two of the big issues that are being discussed in the negotiations right now. Of course, governance and other topics are still open topics. They have not been finalized at this point in time.
Thank you. Are there other questions for us today on EU-UK negotiations? I do not see any, so I open the floor to other issues. Ernest.
Yes, bonjour Eric, tu m'entends?
Absolument, vas-y.
Okay, I have a question on vaccines. Last November, after the virtual EU call, President von der Leyen said that because the Commission has well organized the commanding of vaccines, there might be a surplus for member states. So what is left, they can give it to the Balkans, which she also repeated at the press conference after the last summit, that the leftovers will be given to the Balkans. Now, authorities in the Balkans are still trying to find other ways to get it faster, because they say that these leftovers from EU might come not before summer. I just wanted your services to confirm, and especially those coordinating these vaccines, if this is true, or if they are trying to give these leftovers to the Balkans maybe at the same time, if this has changed. I don't know. Donc, je veux une réponse sur ça. Merci.
Merci, Ernest. Je pense que, well, sorry, your question was in English. My understanding is that this is something which is currently being discussed. There are still lots of variables which are open when it comes to the exact timing and rhythm with which vaccines will be made available. And what the President has said is that it is our clear intention to encourage member states to do this, and that we would be happy to ensure that this is done in a European process vis-à-vis the Balkans and other neighbors. But of course, the details still have to be worked out. So I think that is something that we'll come back to in the future. Are there other questions for us today on the issue of vaccination, vaccines, and more generally the health situation? Please only keep your hand raised if your question is on this. Ernest, you had a follow-up?
Timing, this is in discussion, no? We don't know if these leftovers from the EU will be given to the Balkans in January, in March, or in August. yet.
Ernest, that's exactly what I've said. I think we say surplus. You know, the vaccines we're talking about, the doses we're talking about, are exactly the same as the ones which will be used in the EU. When it comes to the calendar, I cannot say anything more for the moment. Any other questions for us on health-related issues? I do not see any, so I open the floor to other issues, and I pass the floor to Nima, who had asked the floor previously. Nima.
You hear me?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. Okay. Salut, Eric. The question is actually about, I have two questions. One, it was EU diplomats, they want to hold a conference about how to develop trade in Iran. And the conference today was cancelled due to protest by European countries over the execution of Ruhollah Azzam, an Iranian journalist who had taken refuge in France and was executed in Tehran 3 days ago. So I'm wondering how EU wants to go further. It was a symbolic protest, or just what is the condition of EU? Because in 2 days, we're just waiting for another discussion on JCPOA with China and Russia. Thank you.
Thank you. I pass the floor to Peter.
Thank you and good afternoon. Well, I wouldn't mix the two issues, the JCPOA and the Europe-Iran Forum, so I will try to tackle it one by one. So first on the unfortunate execution that happened over the weekend in Iran, we were very clear what we think about it. We issued already on Saturday a statement where we condemned in strongest possible terms this execution and recalled our unwavering opposition to the death penalty. We also addressed few calls on the Iranian authorities regarding the respect of the due process when it comes to people being tried under different accusations, and to cease the practice of using televised confessions. And we also called on Iranian authorities to refrain from any future executions and to pursue a consistent policy towards the abolition of the death penalty. The forum was not cancelled. The forum was postponed because the circumstances are not right, exactly because of what happened on Saturday with this unfortunate execution. The forum was intended to promote the business between the economical cooperation between Iran and European Union. You know that our policy with Iran follows the strand of engaging where we can and airing our opposition or our positions on issues where we don't disagree and discussing these positions. So this is what we do. But again, due to the very unfortunate events on Saturday when this execution took place, it was assessed by the organizers and also by the European participants that this is not the right time to organize such a forum. And then the organizers of the forum decided to postpone it. When it comes to the joint commission of the JCPOA, it's still scheduled for this Wednesday. It will take place in a virtual format. It's not possible to meet in person as we originally thought, but it will take place. But the main aim of the joint commission is to discuss issues related to the JCPOA, to the nuclear agreement, and how to proceed in implementing this agreement.
Thank you, Peter. Nima, you have a follow-up.
I'm just wondering, Peter, what is the difference between these meetings and the meeting of diplomats about trade and whatever? What's the difference, and what's the EU condition? Because it's not the first time that it's a sort of execution happening. And the second question is, exactly. What is the EU condition? I mean, when you can go and further and talk, negotiate. If you're telling me that it's just suspended, not cancelled.
Well, if I understood you right, you want to have a differentiation between the two types of the meeting. So the Joint Commission of the JCPOA is a meeting of representatives of all the signatories of the JCPOA. There are 3 European countries, but there are also other countries which are not European. The JCPOA or the Joint Commission is discussing aspects related to the commitments and obligations by all the signatories related to implementation of this agreement. So that's the discussions at the appropriate level among the representatives of the countries which are part of the JCPOA. And there are 3 participants come from Europe, but there are also other participants. So you cannot connect it, or you cannot link it, or you cannot even compare it in the nature and in the substance and in the aims and objectives with the forum which was planned to start today, which was Europe-Iran Forum, which was focused more on bilateral European-Iranian trade and economic issues. That was the aim, in order to see how we can develop trade cooperation further than it's today. And indeed, there, the European representatives, the representatives of the European participants that were scheduled or intended to participate, they decided that this is not the time for such discussions. So in the meantime, so it was postponed. So until the time when we all find that it is useful or appropriate to hold such a meeting, in the meantime, we will continue our dialogue and our outreach to the Iranian partners to let them know about our position when it comes to the death penalty, when it comes to such trials, and when it comes to handling the human rights issues in general. By the way, this was something that was raised also from our side during the high-level political discussions we had with Iranians last week on Wednesday, and we intend to continue in raising these issues in our contact with Iranian partners at appropriate levels and in appropriate formats every time there is a need and there is a reason to raise it.
Mose, I see you have a question on the death penalty. I think that Peter has extensively answered what is our position on this. So let's see if you have a new angle. And please make sure that we get the beginning of the question.
Okay, hello.
Yes.
Thanks. Do you hear me today, I hope?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I have a related questions to Peter. We know that the External Action Service issued this statement on Saturday, I think, condemning the execution of this Iranian journalist. But it also criticized, let's say, the Iranian court system for carrying out televised trials, or show trials, may I call them, and without any due process. So my question is, would this mean that, in principle, that EU could consider to decide on sanctions according to this new global sanctions scheme which was adopted last week? That's my first question. And the second question, there is another person who's been condemned to death and is facing his execution, and that is a Swedish-Iranian researcher by name Jalali. And I wonder what can be done, what the Commission or EU or member states is doing in order to save his life before it's too late. Thank you.
Peter.
Thank you, Mose. Thank you. You're right. These are issues of human rights, and the human rights sanction regime was developed in order to sanction the abuses or violations of human rights wherever they happen in the world. It's up to the member states to decide whether they would apply them in this particular case, but anything is possible once the member states agree. Let me just recall that Iran is already subject to one sanctions regime regarding serious violations of human rights. We have the so-called EU autonomous Iran human rights sanctions regime in place. It's targeting 82 Iranian individuals and 1 Iranian entity for serious human rights violations. And these sanctions are periodically reviewed. This particular sanction regime is reviewed on an annual basis. And as I said, if the member states think it is appropriate to apply or to extend this sanction regime, they will discuss, they will agree. If they decide they want to use the new sanctions regime, then they would discuss and decide. So this is something that's in the competence of the member states to do or to decide. That's the first part of your question. The second part of your question, indeed, this is also one of the concerns we have regarding this dual citizen, Swedish and Iranian, where actually a number of actors are involved, primarily Sweden, because it's a citizen of Sweden, but of course he's also EU citizen. So we are helping and doing what we can, seeking clarifications from the Iranian partners, doing the necessary outreach, and we hope that the execution will not proceed, of course.
Okay, thank you very much. I see no further questions on Iran, so we go to Georg. Georg, you have the floor.
Thank you, Eric. Has the summit last week discussed the new EU-US agenda for global change? And do you remember any of the arguments eventually made by the heads of state? And could we know what the Commission plans to do as the next step on that agenda? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Georg. I wish I was in the room when leaders are discussing such issues, but unfortunately I am not, so it's difficult for me to remember what heads of state and government have said, and it would not be my role to basically, in any case, reveal the discussions in the European Council. The only thing I can tell you is that there is a paragraph on EU-US relations, paragraph 29, in the conclusions of the European Council that pertain to EU-US relations, and say that indeed there was a discussion on the issue, and which highlighted, of course, the importance of the strong strategic transatlantic partnership, and the fact that the EU is looking forward to work with the United States on a certain number of issues, including the COVID-19 pandemic, tackling climate change, enhancing the economic recovery, cooperating on digital and technological matters, strengthening mutual trade, address trade disputes, reform the WTO, and promote multilateralism as well as peace and security. Now, very interestingly, these are precisely many of the issues which we put forward in our communication. So I think that on substance, it is clear that the European Council is very much aligned with the issues which the Commission has brought forward when it comes to future priorities for cooperation with the United States. Right, are there other questions for us on foreign relations today? And I see that Anna has raised her hand. Anna, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Indeed, I have a question to Peter about the situation of Sahrawi people, because there were recent developments during the weekend, and I would like to know his opinion, the opinion of European diplomacy concerning the future of Sahrawi, and also maybe to comment on the best possible outcome, because Algeria already disagreed with the status of autonomy for Sahrawi, so maybe he can place it in broader Mediterranean context, because it concerns Mediterranean neighborhood of the EU.
Thank you, Anna. I pass the floor to Peter. Looking forward to a broad description of the issue. Peter, you have the floor.
Right. I can actually put it into very international context. It doesn't have to be the regional Mediterranean, because this is something the Western Sahara issue for us is something that needs to be solved in political negotiations under the auspices of the EU. And here the position of the EU has not changed, has remained all the same. And we call for a quick resumption of negotiations under the auspices of the United Nations to find a just, lasting and mutually acceptable political solution to the issue. And that needs to be in compliance with the respective resolutions of the Security Council of the UN, in particular the last one on this issue from the end of this October. And in this context, I can only add that we are looking forward to the appointment of the new personal envoy of the UN Secretary General in order to pursue this political process. But the future determination, the determination of the status of Western Sahara and the future of its people needs to be, from the European point of view, decided in a political process under the auspices of the UN.
Thank you, Peter. Are there other foreign relations related questions for us today? That does not seem to be the case. I open the floor to other issues if there are any. I do not see any, so I would like to thank you for your participation and wish you a good afternoon. See you tomorrow for the college readout after the college meeting. Thank you.